Arizona State University's 4 campuses and ASU Care are located in the Salt River Valley ancestral territories of indigenous peoples, including the Okino, Ottawa, and Pequash Indian communities, whose care of keeping these lands allow us to be here today. We acknowledge the sovereignty of these nations and seek to foster an environment of success and possibility for Native American patrons and communities.
Good evening. Oh, you can do better than that. Man, you got drinks. Good evening. How you doing, everybody? My name is Harold Branch. I affectionately go by HB, and I'm honored to be your host this evening for Gather Storytelling. How many of you have been here before? Okay, so you know what to expect. No, you don't. No, it's different every time. It's different every time, but I am glad that you're back. It's nothing like storytelling. The storytelling, you get to see into the souls of individuals and lifestyles and experiences that you haven't lived yourself. It expands empathy. It expands understanding. It makes you laugh at people, which is always funny. I mean, that's good, right, to do that. And so ASU Care, we're really excited to have you all here. And we have a phenomenal lineup of storytellers that are going to focus on our theme, which is fathers, dads, fatherhood, right? I guess Father's Day is around the corner. None of you clapped when I said fatherhood or fathers. You see how they treat us, Dad? You see how they do us? Man. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. This is not my first time at a storytelling event, even though compared to our veteran storytellers, it is. The first time I ever shared a story was for ASU Care. It was during COVID, and I did it on Zoom. Very different telling my story to a screen. Usually I'm watching stories on the screen, right? But then when we got personal, they asked me to come and tell a live story. It was my first time. I was terrified. I was shook, but I do poetry, so it wasn't that bad, right? And then now they asked me to come back and host, so I guess next time I'll be the owner. We got to keep progressing, right? I am a poet. I've been writing poetry for 32 years, and I've been performing for 30 years. Can you believe this? I got people that I grew up with that I've known for years and years. It's 30 years. What does that say about me? I had a whole lot of hair when I started. And when I close my eyes, I still do, right? Currently, I am a student. I'm working on my PhD. I'm at the end of my that journey for performance. Thank you. For performance psychology. Because performing will make you crazy, and I'm here to help. And I have I am a father, which is most important tonight, of 2 amazing children, also ASU students. My son is a senior right over here at ASU right now, and my daughter is 15. She's a senior at Herberger Young Scholars Institute, which is right on the ASU West campus, right? So very, very proud of them and proud of what we're about to do tonight. Oh, she told me to make sure I tell you, I also founded one of the longest running poetry venues in the state of Arizona. We just celebrated 15 years, home-based poetry, right? We just celebrated 15 years. That's exciting. If you know poetry, we don't survive that long. We jump around to a whole lot of different coffee houses, right? But that's what we've been doing, and pretty excited about that. One of the things that makes us different, because there are different storytelling events around the valley. And one of the things that makes Gather Storytelling a little bit unique is that the host gets to tell a story. The host gets to share in the tradition, maybe the fables, maybe the history, the cultural importance of storytelling. So, allow me to share a little bit. See, fatherhood is a very interesting topic. And it's interesting because there's a lie that's been out there for a really long time, that the black community doesn't have fathers. That's a lie. That's a lie. Even our non-fathers are fathers. It's amazing how that works. See, we know that that concept was fed by the slave trade horrifically, and the division of the families for generations and generations and generations until it permeated the community. So we've been fighting against something pretty strong. And in the midst of all that, we're still fathers. It was also continued, the lie, that is, that black men aren't fathers, by a CDC study. And the studies actually researched marriage and equated marriage in the same home with fatherhood. That's not a good measurement. I got friends whose parents were married. They didn't know their daddy, and their dad didn't know them. But people ran with that because it was a part of the stereotype. It was easy to believe because that's what was on television. That's what the talking heads said. It's like when people say black on black crime is an issue. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. There's no such thing as black on black crime. 80% of crime against black people done by black people. 70% of crime against white people done by white people. You know what it's called? Proximity. My family happens to be black. Most of them. I got a whole bunch. I mean, we United Nations, you know what I'm saying? So it perpetuated that. But it wasn't long after that, the CDC put out a different study and they measured fatherhood engagement. And they measured fatherhood engagement by eating a meal with your child, by preparing for bedtime. And guess who ranked top amongst all fathers culturally? Black fathers. This is something I want you to take with you. See, I was raised by fathers. And unfortunately, my father wasn't around, but my uncles were. And in that home, I grew up with my uncle dads. See, once upon a midnight dreary while I pondered weak and weary. It was many, many a year ago in the kingdom by the sea there lived a maiden whom you may know. Way down in the jungle's deep, lion stepped on the signifying monkey's feet. Some of y'all don't know that one. Look it up. See, my uncle instilled poetry in my soul. Uncle Sonny, one of my fathers. And the thing about Double R, as they called him in the street, is that he would come home drunk, high. See, my uncle was a gangster, an alcoholic, an addict, and a street scholar. Everywhere in my home, there was a book in arm's reach. On the couch, just put your hand under it. It's going to be a book. In the kitchen, we had books next to the cup. You know we had reading material in the bathroom. That's a whole nother thing. This is pre-phones. But Uncle Sonny would come home and he would recite The Raven to me and Annabelle Lee to me and Dolomite to me, and he would do it from memory. Drunk, high, and funny as hell. See, this is in the spirit of the original storytellers. The griots is who I grew up with. The descendants of the West African storytellers is in my bones. That's why when we talk, so animated, It is absolutely who we are. And Uncle Sonny, the passion, it would take him an hour to get the Raven out. Because he would say, nephew, did you hear how that line rhymed with the other line? And he, oh my God, this is brilliant. What's that stuff you listen to? Rap? No, this is the first rap. It sounded right to me. Why not? See, Uncle Sonny is the reason my life got changed. And I was able to use poetry for my mental health, to survive, to live, to make it outside of the west side of Chicago. That was Uncle Sonny. But he wasn't my only father. Uncle Chris used to take me down the street, and when we walked, he said, you walk on the inside always. Never walk down the street with your hands in your pockets, because you may fall. How you gonna catch yourself? Or somebody may show up to rob you. How do you defend yourself? Uncle Chris used to watch cartoons. He was a grown-ass man. That's before grown-ass men watch cartoons. But Uncle Chris showed me that it's okay to maintain the child inside. I was watching a cartoon before I got here today. Uncle Pat taught me how to be smooth. Uncle Pat had that voice. Uncle Pat was a player. My sister loves when I talk about Uncle Pat because Uncle Pat had that voice. You know what I mean? And when he used to say, he ain't say my name, hey, nephew, why you cooking your eggs like that? Because he taught me to cook too. He taught me to raise my standards because he traveled. So he taught me that traveling was important. The military began his traveling. And as a result, you cooking your eggs too long. Look, let me show you. This is called sunny side up. This is, you see, you want the yolk to be a little bit runny so you can taste it. I don't know what they got you learning, nephew. What are they doing? Don't you ever make your steak well done. They're crazy, nephew. Uncle Pat taught me how to roll dice, and that was important to keep your house clean. My other father, Pops, my Papa Earlis, the dad of my brother and sister, way down in the jungles deep. See, he reminded me, and he let me know that being black and being proud wasn't enough. You have to be black, you have to be proud, and you have to move the agenda forward for equality. Know that you got Black Panthers in your bloodline. And everything ain't okay until we're all okay. He taught me that a child's siblings is your child, period. And the Ross side of my family, they don't even know I ain't blood. I'm just Earlis's youngest boy. And then, the number one father I've had, after my dad was gone and my mother passed away when I was 2, but 10 years my senior was my big brother Earl. And Earl taught me so much how to move, both in the street and in a boardroom area space. How to fight, how to defend myself, how to move with confidence. He taught me that going to the library and having a library card is essential. He taught me to expand my thinking, visit the mosque, see what's going on, know what's happening. And together, after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, I ain't had pork since. My big brother taught me hip hop, and he taught me rap. And he did this while serving in Desert Storm. Just like my uncles, who were almost all veterans as well. And from Desert Storm, he sent me a box of tapes. MC Light, Dana Dane, Public Enemy, Fight the Power. And it was those tapes that I played over and over and over again. He took me to get my first baseball cap, and he showed me how to get the waves in my hair. My big brother Earl taught me how to iron. I still iron everybody's clothes. Let me knock those wrinkles out for you. You see, even if my biological wasn't available, it is our culture. Every man raised every boy in the vicinity. I didn't just have one father. I had a whole household. They taught me how to survive. And as a result, I'm here to teach my children how to live. So grateful for my dad. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And for all of you here who don't have a black father, go get one. You're missing a whole lot. I encourage you. I really do. I want to go ahead and bring to you your first storyteller. However, that until you all are ready, could you check your cell phones, make sure they're on silent and or vibrate. And if it's on vibrate, make sure it's not that strong helicopter vibrate. We could hear that too. All right? So allow me to, there we go. Come on over, soldier. That's right. Oh, that's how queens move. One on each arm. Wow. There you go. Let me introduce to you Betsy Dillard Stroud. I got it right like every day before now. Pardon me. Stroud. Nationally and internationally renowned visual artist. In 2007, one of only 28 Americans invited to exhibit in the first international exhibition of watercolor masters in China. She is a signature and life member and Dolphin Fellow of the American Watercolor Society in New York. Betsy has published 4 books, 1 memoir, and 3 art books. She is a former president of Park Central Toastmasters in Phoenix. I'm telling you, she does this, right? Get ready. She earned her PhD ABD in art history from the University of Virginia. I want you all to please give an amazing round of applause and do not hold back your energy during her story. I could see your faces turning red if you do. Just let it out. Don't fight the feeling, people. All right? Please give it up for Betsy Dillard Stroud.
Thank you so very much. I'm happy to be here. And so good evening to all of you and to TML and a whole bunch of other friends. Tonight, I'm going to talk about my uncle. And I think he and HD's uncle would have been best friends, let me tell you. I know they would have been. Most people grow up hearing the good book says, or the Bible says. We heard Herbert says. His words were as infallibly ironclad as the golden rule. He was my uncle, the younger my father, and it'll take me a while to get to exactly what I'm saying about him. But I do want to tell you things about him, and I think that's important when you're talking about somebody, to talk about how they looked, what they did, and other things, and maybe, too, their secrets. At the age of 3, he sent me my first book, and it was Robert Louis Stevenson's a child's book of verses. That's not quite right. Anyway, you get it. So my love affair with the arts had begun. And throughout my life, he really, I can see it's like a mosaic, putting tesseract in the mosaic as to what he did for me. It started with that book, A Child's Garden of Verses, but it didn't end, and it still hadn't ended, and he's been dead since 1976. Herbert was not an athletic person. In fact, when his great uncle wrote VMI, which is Virginia Military Institute, he said, I want to ask you to take my nephew into VMI. He's somewhat of a sissy because he likes to raise flags, and he sings with a vested choir and studies Greek. And he's only 15, no, 16. So that was the introduction of my uncle to VMI, where he taught for 38 years until he died. Herbert was a unit commander in World War II, and he, no matter where he went, people always found something funny about him. Imagine this. He's on a destroyer. He's communications officer. He picks up his binoculars and he goes, "Oh, Lordy, here come the Japs!" Terrible. Now, I didn't mean that racial slur, but I had to say it like that to get the gist of what he said then. His ship was the first to land in Nagasaki after the bomb, and he fought in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. I didn't know all these things, and I was just a little girl when he came home from the war, but immediately I could tell that he had something really special about him, and I even nicknamed him Old Bald-Headed Herbert. Now, you'd think that somebody would get mad at that. Oh, he didn't. He was fantastic. He bought a book of paintings, and it sat on my grandmother's table in the parlor. I was too little to pick it up, so I had to get people to pick it up and put it on the floor so I could look through that. And the very first painting I ever did was from that book, and it was the Venus, Botticelli's Birth of Venus. 20-some years later, Herbert and I were in the Uffizi in Florence, standing in front of that painting, holding hands, and we both started crying. What he did for me was just amazing. First, the book, and then I'd been drawing on walls for years, and my mother was furious because I had to paint the living room all the time because I was drawing, and usually it was Mama Owl, Papa Owl, and an enormous owl, and I was the enormous owl. Well, my mother didn't like it one bit. My father loved it, but my mother was dad blamed sick painting the walls of the living room. So he talked them into getting me a tutor. I was 8 years old, and he gave me my first set of oil paints. Well, I went to the tutor. I sat on this big stool. She had a whole bunch of chrysanthemums. She painted one. Oh, it was just gorgeous. I painted 4. They were ugly as you know what. So when I went home, when I went to my grandmother's house where Herbert was, I was crying. And Herbert said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Hers is so pretty and mine is so ugly." He said, "Nonsense, darling. Yours is a Monet." So that was the attitude that he had. And it was always something like that, encouraging me, encouraging me, encouraging me. And he was a rock. during my teenage years, my father tried suicide. It was merciful. He lived through the first, but the second he didn't. And Herbert was like a rock to all of us. He ended up marrying my mother 4 years later and adopting me and my two sisters. And some people, they said, oh, he teaches Shakespeare. He's just trying to copy Hamlet. But he was so gentle in so many ways, and yet he could be very tough. One day he got mad. He said, all you can do is draw paper dolls with faces as fatuous as your own. And I said, what's fatuous? He said, look it up. I looked it up. I cried, but I still remember what it means. Herbert was bullheaded. He was so dad-blame smart. He got his PhD from Harvard after he graduated from VMI, and he ended up also getting lots of grants and things to Princeton and even the University of Berlin. But he said, he was so funny, and he always assumed that he was right. So one night, there was a cadet down that he was tutoring, and I was sitting in the living room reading, but I could hear everything they said. Everything. Herbert said, for God's sake, don't say that somebody passed away. Say died. What do you think, he had a damn kidney stone? So the cadet said, but Colonel Dillard, everybody says passed away. Why can't I say it? And Herbert said, because it's a matter of taste. And the cadet said, whose taste? And Herbert said, mine. So he was pretty arrogant about what he knew, but you couldn't help but laugh. I mean, really, I've had bottles of mayonnaise go past my head because I mispronounced something. It wasn't funny at the time. It's funny now. And he was just wonderful. But there was the one tragic flaw in my family, and that is alcoholism. So there were bouts of being okay, but both he and my father were alcoholics. And they were the kind of alcoholics that if you take one drink, you end up in a hospital, an alcoholic hospital. And so he had that over him his whole life, except the last 2 years. He quit drinking and had nothing to drink. So the fact that he had such a following of students, it was wonderful, it really was. And yet he'd go in the hospital, but he'd pull himself together. And it was wonderful to see him just try and try and try to get over this terrible disease. So 10 years after he died, VMI had a celebration for his life. And I flew up, but they asked me to come up. And this is the reason why. When Herbert died, I was so grief-stricken that I could hardly think. And I decided right then and there that I was going to write a book about him. Now, the nabobs of negativity came out in force. Yeah. Who are you to write about such a complex man? I'm his adopted daughter. That's who I am. And I'll write about what I want and who I want to write about. You know, that's the whole thing. That's what you can do as a writer. Maybe people won't read you, but you can still do that. And if you have somebody you really love, maybe it's worth it to write a book about them. Not only do you find out things about that person, you find out things about yourself. And you find out that you can do things that you never thought you would do. So VMI is having this big celebration in Herbert's life, about Herbert's life. And when I wrote the book about him, I had no idea what was going to happen. But now, the first money that was put into that fund for the Colonel Herbert Nash Dillard Memorial is worth over $1 million. Wow. Yes. And so, yes, and the first scholar to come was W.H. Auden. So I feel that Herbert's spirit is still alive, and I feel that's probably the best thing I ever did was write that book. But anyway, so the day that they had the big luncheon arrived, and I had to go unveil a portrait that one cadet had paid a New York artist to do. And I thought, I'm going to hate this dad blame thing. I'm an artist. It's going to be all wrong. It's going to be drawn wrong. They'll never get that mouth of his. Well, I cut the cord. The cloth fell down. Oh, my God. It was exactly like him. Well, not exactly, but it was Herbert. And the tears welled up in my eyes, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to start crying. I have to go up and I have to speak. Please, God, don't let me cry yet. I was just overcome by his image appearing in this canvas. So I walked to the front of the room, and I kidded all the guys, 300 and some guys, former students of his, were in front of me. The only other woman in the room was my mother, and she tried not to come, and I said, you're going, and you're going to stand by me when I cut that cord, and I don't mean maybe. So I thought, I talked about, his Ka, the Egyptian spirit, floating around the room trying to hear if any bad grammar was made. And then finally I thought of these words from The Tempest. Full fathom 5 my father lies. Those were pearls that were his eyes. Of his bones are coral made. Nothing of him doth fade, but does suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Well, I thought, okay, now I am going to cry, so I've got to say something fast so I don't cry. And I said, as I'm standing here, I'm going to leave you with Herbert's own words. And I say this to all of you. Whether you be a poet, a prophet, a Philistine, or a priest, go forward and burn with a gem-like flame. Those were his words that I leave you with.
Awesome.
Betsy, thank you.
Oh,
Betsy, I got a question for you before you get out of here.
yes.
I do have a question for you
All right.
because that was a great story. Thank you. Herbert was a complicated man. Is that fair to say?
Very complicated.
He's a complicated man. But when you tell the story, even the rough parts of it, even the aspects that wasn't as attractive on him, or maybe just downright mayonnaise bottles. There's some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
How do you tell those stories? Because you even tell those parts of the story with joy and love and positivity and all of that goodness. How do you maintain that focus and that view and that perspective on the entire man that was Herbert?
I think it's so important to forgive.
You want to raise your mic?
Sorry about that. I think it's so important to forgive. People have forgiven me. I haven't lived a perfect life.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you all haven't either. But I like what Saint Exupéry said. don't worry about the things you've done. Don't, now I've forgotten it, I'm having a senior moment.
It sounds
Anyway,
deep
it
already,
goes-
though. I like it.
It kind of goes that way, you know, it's like, oh, I wish I could remember it. He was great. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? Herbert forgave me for a lot of things I did.
Yeah.
One night, I thought he was Dracula. I was out with some Washington and Lee boys. We were walking around. We'd been drinking artillery punch.
Art.
Yes, 150 proof. And, you know, I was 18. I had no business drinking that.
Sound like then nobody have any business drinking it.
So, and we were laughing, and of course now, when I start laughing, I can't quit. And here is Herbert walking toward us, and I goes, Dracula!
Yeah,
But
I
guess
guess the
what? It was
complication
Herbert.
continues, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can we please give it up? Betsy, Dillard, Stroud, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You like to- Absolutely, of course.
Now, I hope they're up in heaven talking. Your uncle and I.
They probably are. And knowing them, they're probably having
Yeah,
fist fights
I'm gonna sit here.
randomly, right? All right, everybody, you enjoying yourself? Let me do a crowd check-in. You good? You good? You great? You good or great? All right, all right, all right. We have another, and I want you to know, Miss Betsy, she's been here before. These are veteran storytellers. Also, our next storyteller has been here before as well. I'm talking about our brother Kyle Mitchell, and I want to make sure that I get his bio correct as well. Kyle Mitchell is Danae, and a storyteller, educator, and a veteran. He grew up on the reservation with his grandparents, where he learned his family's work ethic, along with the oral tradition. I feel you, bro. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the Army, where he served 2 tours, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. He is currently the manager of the Guadalupe Center at South Mountain Community College, and he is adjunct faculty of the Storytelling Institute at the same college. I want you all to please give it up for Kyle Mitchell.
All right. Okay. Good? All right. I was going to get distance going. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome tonight. As I was introduced, I am Dene. So those of you who are not familiar with Dene, that's Navajo. And so within our culture, we always introduce ourselves. So I'm going to do that right now. Yate, She'e, Kyle Mitchell, Yenshia, Twitchini, Nishle, Nakai, Busichin, Kayani, Deshiche, Nakai, Deshinala. Shiche a Jim Mitchell Willia, Shemasana a Eileen Mitchell Willia, Shema a Diana Mitchell Willia, Kiltsui Bitwa, although Zithno Dozi Denasha. All right, we're good to go. Everybody understand that? So within our culture, we know, we just don't understand, but we know that every single person born is made up of 4 clans, because we all have a mother, a father. Our mother has a father, and our father has a father, and that's our clans. So the story I'm going to share tonight is about a person I just introduced you to, my Che, my mother's grandfather, Jim Mitchell. And I'm going to share a few little stories, kind of go through this. So I, like other individuals out there, didn't have my biological dad, and it's just the way of the world. Even in our stories, we talk about that there's one parent missing, and that's okay. And what do we do in that place? We embrace it with community. We embrace it with family. And my grandfather became my father figure. My earliest, so he was born in 1931. He grew up in a little community called Chinle. His grandfather was a medicine man. His father worked for the railroad as it was being built and being progressed into California. He was the oldest of 6 children. So that's a little background for you. after he graduated, well, actually, so he went to Fort Wingate School. And he used to go on the railroad when he wanted to go back home. He would just jump on the boxcar and make his way. And since he was in school, he knew how to write. So as he was jumping on the train, he would tell us stories about meeting all these different Navajo men who were working on the railroad. And they all wanted to write home, but they didn't know how to write. So he wrote for them. And he was paid in bologna sandwiches and bread and whatever they had on them. That's who my grandfather was. After his time in school, he enlisted in the military, and this was during the Korean War. And so he enlisted, did his basic training, went to airborne school, became a paratrooper, and then he deployed to Korea, where he spent continuous 30 months, earning himself 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, with Valor, and some medals. And all of that I didn't know, but I'll get to that later. So I remember growing up with my grandparents up on the Navajo reservation, about 40 miles north of Winslow, right? Standing on the corner, that song about people just being bums, right? Hanging out. North of there is where I grew up. And I remember one of my earliest memories, I was about 8 years old, and my grandmother and her sister were going on a trip to New Mexico, to what we call Mount Taylor, right? That's one of our sacred mountains, what we call Denibake, the Navajo land. And we were getting ready to go on this trip, and my Che wanted to stay. And so what he did is he woke me up at the crack of dawn, like every dad does for some reason. It's natural, right? It's just biological. We wake up, oh, the sun's up, I gotta be up. All right. So he woke me up in the morning, and he said, let's go outside. So we went outside to the truck, and he said, you know what? You know what happens a lot of times? Sorry, something flew in my eye. But tires get blown all the time. So I'm gonna teach you how to change a tire today. And I was like, oh, okay. So he pulls the truck up, gets the jack out, jacks it up, takes off the lug nuts, takes off the rim, takes off the tire, props it to the side, shows me, okay, so this is what you do, okay? Here's why you put it back on, get the tire iron and spin it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know, I feel good. And he's like, okay, now it's your turn. What? He's like, yeah, go to the other side, the passenger side, and do what I just did. And so I did. I stood there with all my 8-year-old strength to break that lug nut open, went to the next one, spun that one, and so on and so forth. And he showed me. He says, okay, good. He says, the reason why I'm showing you this is because you're going with your grandma, and you are going to be the man in charge. You're the man. Whatever happens, you need to be there. No matter how young you are, no matter how little you are, here's the skills I'm giving you. Here's the teachings I'm giving you. I said, okay, all right. And then I was done with the passenger tire, and he looked at me and he was like, you know what? There's 2 more tires on this truck. Knock them out. Okay. And so I did. I took those tires off. And that was something that always stayed with me. So whenever I get a flat tire, right away, I know what to do. Instilled, right? Instilled. Another memory I have of my Che is he was a jokester. He was a big, big jokester. He loved to laugh. And growing up, my grandmother would make 3 course meals, right? 3 meals a day. So we would have bacon, eggs, potatoes, fresh tortillas all the time for breakfast. For lunch, we would have magnificent sandwiches. For dinner, we would have meatloaf, mashed potatoes, whatever it was. But we always had to have bread. And my Che always teased my grandma. He would get his plate. He'd look at his plate, play around with it a little bit, look at it here, look at it there, take a little taste and make a face, and he's like, oh, put his fork down. He looked at me and whoever else was at the table, and he looked at my grandmother, and he was like, oh, this is awful. Oh, this is awful. This is awful good. And then he would start eating. And so we would laugh, and we'd start eating with him. And so he was a jokester that way. And also, when I was in my youth, when I was really young, we used to go to ceremonies. And so when we go to ceremonies, you do everything by protocol. We have our tutadine, which is our corn pollen, and we use that. And whenever we end the prayer, we say, Hajonogo Nashani 4 times, and that's what closes us out. Beauty all around us. Beauty above us, below us, in front of us, behind us, all of that. Hajonogo Nashani. And so I've learned how to change a tire, learned how to get a sense of humor, learned how to pray by him. Well, all of that was put to the test. In the fall, 2018, he went on hospice. and my world flipped upside down, right? My rock in my life was going to be moving, his journey was going to continue. And so I remember he was in Flagstaff. I had a hospice care up there. And I drove every weekend to see him. As soon as I was done with work, I packed my bag, and then I was gone. I would take my son, I would take my wife at the time, and we would make our way. And I would just spend time with him. I would sit with him right by his bed, and we would just share, and we would talk. One thing that I didn't mention about myself that was my intro is I'm a veteran. I'm a combat veteran. Just like my grandfather was infantryman, I was infantry too. I got my CIB, and I say that, all my Navajos, all my natives joke around because our acronym in Indian country for CIB is Certified Indian Blood, right? Certificate of Indian Blood. So everybody's like, oh yeah, I got one of those. But in the Army, we call that a combat infantry badge. That means you engage somebody from here to the front door in your time. And so, thank you. And so my grandfather never told me any stories about his time in Korea. Never, ever. It wasn't until I got back that he started sharing, and even then it was a little bit. But there was a time when I went on a Friday night to Flagstaff. And I remember I got there and there was about 2 hours left of visiting time. And so I got him, I picked him up, wheeled him out in his wheelchair, put him in my SUV, and we went to dinner. And we went to dinner, and he was looking at my tattoos, and he was like, oh, yeah. And then he did what old men do. He says, I want to tell you a story. He says, it was a year when he was in Korea, and my grandfather was a staff sergeant at the time, on his way to be a platoon sergeant. And there was one Navajo man that was in another company, but where they were holding their line, they were together. And he said that he knew where that guy lived. They shared, they talked, and they talked in the Nimbazad, the Navajo language. And they talked about the horses, they talked about eating corn, they talked about fry bread, they talked about all those things. And on this gentleman's hand, on this soldier's hand, he had a ring that his mother gave to him. And as they survived some firefights, that man went to my Che and said, if something ever happens to me, I want you to take this ring and give it to my mother and tell her all the things that we talked about and tell her that I'm going to wait for her. And so he shared that story. And right after that, his voice did what mine just did. And he said, so we went into that night together. And the next morning, I'm the only one who made it out. And he says, so I took that ring and I carried that in my pocket for the remainder of my time, which was another year and a half. He kept that. Then he got back home. And as soon as he got back home, he saw his family. And the first person he saw after his, and he talked about that. He talked about what brotherhood was like. And that's where we really connected. We shared that. I wear a bracelet for my best friend who didn't make it back. And we talked about those things. These are things we never talked about before. And I was getting to an adulthood, into a new area. I was a father, right? All these things as an adult, I was adulting. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to navigate all these things. You know, my pillar was ready to make his journey. And so I asked him one time, I said, what am I going to do without you? What am I going to do? Where am I going to be? And he looked at me, and he smiled, and he patted my knee. He says, Setsui, grandson, you're the only person who's ever challenged me by asking me questions. Everybody asks a question, I give a simple answer, and that's it. But you ask me why. And then you keep asking why. And then you ask why again. He says, so I've given so much to you. And when I'm not here, and whenever you hit those tides, you go up and you come back down, think of me. Think of the things I shared with you. Think of the things I taught you, and those will help you. And so as time progressed, the visits, got longer and got longer. And then finally we got to the point to where they let us know, you can take him home now. You're going to have They said till the end of December. And so all of our family got together. We welcomed him home. We had a big celebration. And being an old stubborn man, he made it past December. He made it past January. He even made it past February. And March. And I remember I would drive back home on my drive, and I would stop in either Winslow or Flagstaff, and I'd get groceries. And those groceries would be for me to be the head cook, to give my grandmother rest, to give my uncle rest, for me to be his whole caretaker the whole weekend, to just be there for him. And I remember one morning he woke up, and he always wanted to go outside. He couldn't walk at this point. And so I get his wheelchair. The sun was barely coming up, right? Old man senses, right? They're still going. Spidey senses, oh, the sun's coming up, let's go. And so I wake him up, get him out, take him in his wheelchair, and we would go outside. And I would take him, and he would always want to watch the sunrise to the east. You know, that beautiful time when the sun is making its way up and pushing away all that darkness. We would stand there, and he would ask me to take him down from his wheelchair. So I would, and we would get down on our knees, and he would reach in his pocket and get his tadadine out. He would take some out, and he would give his offerings. And then he would hand it to me, and I would do the same. And he said, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that you're here, that you're able to be outside with me, that you're able to take me to the corral to go see the animals, that you're able to cook for me, that you're able to be there for your grandmother. And he said, one thing I'm really happy to see is the change of the season. He says, look out there. Look at those bushes. They're starting to turn green. Look at those little flowers on the kiltsui. The flowers are the bushes with yellow flowers. Look at those starting to blossom. And he took a deep breath, and he says, my time's going to be soon, but it's going to be okay. And sure enough, on April 30th, 2019, he made his journey. That next morning, I had no idea what to do. I had an empty wheelchair. I didn't know what to do. And so what I did is I looked around in his area, and then I went through my bag, and I found my low patch and I went outside, and I prayed as he was right there next to me. And I prayed for him to have a safe journey home. I prayed for my family to be at peace. I prayed for my son to be strong. And I prayed in prayers of thanks to him for everything that he instilled in me. Because without learning how to do hard work, without learning how to have a sense of humor, and without learning how to pray, I would have never been a ranger. I would have never been a good father. I would never be a new board member with Native Health. And he did all that for me. And so as we go into this weekend, let's remember those who helped us get us where we are today. And so to close this out, like I would close out a prayer, I'm going to say it 4 times. Hajonago Nashlit, Hajonago Nashlit, Hajonago Nashlit, Hajonago Nashlit. Thank you. Nice.
Don't go away. I got a quick question for you.
All right.
So, is this on? Okay. This thing on? All right. As a brother from the reservation, as a Dene man, how important do you feel that it is that you were raised, you had a strong Dene man father figure to help you maneuver through this crazy world?
Oh, it was everything. It was everything because not only what I shared, but also he told stories all the time. Everything had to do with a story. If I was lazy, well, you know, one time one of your uncles was kind of like this, and, you know, everything was shared that way. But it was showing up and being there. He never asked me to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. You know, he modeled the way in everything he did, the way he loved my grandmother, the way he loved his children, his grandchildren. Those foundational blocks are everything to me, and part of our society as a whole and our culture. And so I'm just grateful that I had a good role model. I had somebody who had my back, and somebody who was also a brother in arms that understood what other people don't.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
Yep.
Give it up one more again for Kyle Mitchell. I love storytelling so much because you see the differences, but you see all the similarities. We are the same. We want the same things. And as far as defending, isn't it something else that every story had people defending this nation in the story? It's nothing more American than bleeding for it. I know, because I didn't. I write poetry, so thank you. Thank you for your service. All right, our last storyteller, are you all ready? Yeah. And after that, we're going to have a quick Q&A session, so you get a chance to ask questions as well. Just no math. You guys are nuts. Okay. All right. Next, we have Miss Diana Dinshaw. Super excited to have her. First generation American, born in Karachi, Pakistan, right? Which is awesome. Been living in Arizona for 15 years and is a software engineer right now. She's been featured on the Arizona Storytellers Project and other top events in the Valley as well. In 2016, she stumbled on storytelling through a class at South Mountain Community College, the art of storytelling, right? And it gave her a voice. She felt like it really opened her up. And you know what's pretty cool about this? Now she teaches the class. So started from the bottom. Now you're here. Please give it up for Dinah.
Thank you, Harold. So, like Harold mentioned, I was born and I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan. And despite the fact that Pakistan has a deeply patriarchal culture and society, it was my father who was my biggest champion. My father, Marisban Dinshaw, was one of the most gentle, kind person I have ever met. And his biggest weakness, though, was that he could not say no. And especially to the 4 women in his life. His mother, who we called Mama, his wife, my mother, my sister, and of course me. And believe me, it wasn't from a lack of trying. One time when he tried to say no to me, it didn't go very well for him. I had found a bottle of dried up coral-colored nail polish in the back drawer of my mother's dresser drawer. And I was about 12. I had never put on makeup. And having found that nail polish, I got right to work. And my father saw me and he said, "Dinah, what are you doing? Don't you know women in our family don't wear makeup?" What women are you talking about? Nail polish wasn't even invented when Mama was young. And by the way, I found this in the back of Mummy's dresser drawer. And while he just stood there, befuddled at my response, I blew on the drying up nail polish on my nails and walked away. Now, my father might have been a little conservative where it came to fashion, but he had these 3 seemingly kind of bizarre goals, random goals for my sister and myself. Learning how to swim, learning how to drive, and getting an advanced degree. Now, learning how to swim, right? random. But my father wanted to make sure that if my sister and I were ever on an airplane that crashed in an ocean, we could safely swim to shore. So when I was about 8 and my sister was 10, he would take us to the pool to teach us how to swim. Now my sister, she took to swimming like fish take to water. Me, not so much. As long as he had his hands under my belly, I was fine. But as soon as he would remove his hands, I would spit and I would splatter and I would throw my arms around his neck and hang on there for dear life. This went on for a few days. And then my father finally said to me, as I was hanging on to him, he said, if you swim just the breadth of the pool, just the breadth, from here to here, I will take you out tonight for chicken tikka, which is barbecue chicken. Now, my father knew how to motivate me. I took a deep breath, and spitting and splattering, I swam the breadth of the pool. That night, true to his word, he marked that milestone by taking us all out for chicken tikka to my favorite restaurant. Now, when it came to driving, it didn't take much. I was ready for it. Now, even though there is no law against women driving in Pakistan, in the 80s it wasn't common, especially for a young 17, 18-year-old to be driving. But my father knew the independence it would give me. And I was really excited to start learning how to drive. So I went to my father, who was having his morning tea, and he was reading his newspaper. And I said, Dad, I'm ready to learn how to drive. And he folded his newspaper, took off his dark-rimmed glasses, and he said, the first lesson to safely learn how to drive is to know how to turn on the car. And with that, he took out the keys to his 1965 white Fiat, and he handed them to me. And I grabbed those keys, I ran downstairs, I opened the car door, I sat inside the car, and I turned on the engine. This went on for a few days. I was an expert on turning on the car. If you needed your car engine turned on, I was your go-to person. So then I went to my father and I said, Dad, I'm ready for lesson number 2. And he said, the lesson number 2 for safely driving a car is A, B, C. Accelerator, brake, clutch. So that day, I went downstairs, opened the car, sat down on the seat, turned the engine on, and still in park, the tip of my toes, I pressed accelerator, brake, clutch. And I practiced accelerator, brake, clutch. Now, it was around this time that my father's health started failing, and I knew that there would not be lesson number 3. But I did learn how to drive, and the day I got my driver's license, my father marked that milestone by giving me the keys of his white 1965 Fiat. This was also around the time when I was ready to graduate from high school. And I knew that I wanted to be an engineer. Now, my father himself was a high school dropout. He had not finished school. And when his business failed, we struggled financially, really struggled financially, because not having had a formal education, it was hard for him to find a job and support his family. And he wanted to make sure that my sister and I would never have that situation. And he wanted to make sure that we went to college, had an education, so that we could stand on our feet and be financially independent. Now, in the history of Pakistan, at that time, there was a lot of political turmoil. And the college students were very involved in the protests. They were very active. And when they would protest, they would get arrested, and sometimes even killed in the clashes. So my father was a little concerned, but I was ready. I was ready to take the risk because I wanted to go to college and get my engineering degree. So when I got admission into my first choice of college, I was so excited, and I went home and I told my parents, and my father promised that he would go the very next day to the college and pay the deposit fees. The next evening, when my father came home, he would not make eye contact with me. He went right into the room. A little while later, my mother came out, and she said, "Your father thinks you are too young to go to a co-ed school, so you need to go to the all-girls college and finish your bachelor's there." Now, you can imagine how I felt, how angry I was. I didn't speak to my father for weeks. And finally, one day, my mother sat me down and she said, "You know, when I came and told you what your father said, it really wasn't about you being too young to go to a co-ed school. He did go to the college to pay your fees. And while he was filling out the form, the person asked him, 'What political party should we register your daughter for?' And fearing for my life and my safety, he left right away and didn't turn back. I eventually did get an advanced degree. And when I graduated with an MBA, by that time my father's health, because of his diabetes, had become even worse. And he was hunched up, he couldn't see, and he was walking with a walker. But on my graduation, he stood tall and gifted me 3 strings of pearls to mark that milestone. A few years later, I immigrated and came to the United States. A year after I moved here, my father passed away. And as I navigated my new life here, I realized that I am never swimming the English Channel. I am never going to be racing in Formula One. I'm not even a rocket scientist. But what my father gave me, the gift of safety and independence, should be the birthright of every child. Hashtag Marisban, hashtag my champion, hashtag I love you, Dad. Thank you.
Such a beautiful story. Oh my God, such an amazing, amazing story. I know you mentioned that growing up in a very patriarchal society, which we all are growing up in a patriarchal society. In case you, I'm, all right. I got your back, sister. I got you. How awesome was it having a man who did not subscribe to that and fed that fierceness in you, your sisters, and supported it in your mother?
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I can't even start to tell you. Like, I know we talk about feminism here. My father was a feminist even before we knew what that meant. As I said, like, he was devoted to my mother, his mother, and my sister and myself. He was just a remarkable, remarkable man.
There it is. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please. I'm going to hand this over. So we have another microphone there.
Thank you.
Please give it up for our storytellers. And you saw that I got a chance to ask questions. Thank you. I had an opportunity to ask questions of our storytellers, and we want to give you an opportunity as well. And we got a few minutes to do so, but I do have a first question. But I want you to answer my question fast so we can get to them. All right? Did you know what story you were going to tell? Dads and father figures, when you were presented with this option, did you, I got it, or did you have to think about it and mull it over?
I didn't have to think about it.
You didn't even have to think about it.
Nope.
Had it
Nope.
ready to go.
Right, well, no, I'm not even sure. No, there are always things that you wish you'd said.
Right.
In 7 minutes, it's difficult.
Absolutely. But you knew the direction
Oh,
you
I
were going to
knew,
go.
Yeah, I think I did, yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You got the microphone, good brother. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, let's see. So being a storyteller, we have a repertoire. Yes, yes. So there was an assortment. There was some pickings. There was an assortment. It was
Okay.
you know.
Does it
assorted
come with Grey
dozen.
Poupon?
Oh yeah, of course. Little side.
All right.
Yeah. No. So I was between actually two stories. So
Mhm.
when it came closer and closer, I started thinking, I could either tell a story about me being a father, or I can tell a story about who taught me to become a father. And that's why I settled on.
My man. Thank you very much. Dinah, please.
Yeah, as soon as I got the email from Stacy and it said the theme was dads and father figures, I knew exactly who I wanted to tell about and what I wanted to tell. Yeah, there was no, not even a moment's thought about it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, I want to go to the audience. If you all may have some questions individually or as a group, we'll love to get some feedback from you all. So who has a question? Oh, for the record, you have been sitting here silently the whole time and we've been bearing our souls. So not trying to guilt you into participating, but trying to guilt you into participating. And so who has a question that you would like to ask? Please.
I would like you to answer the question that you asked them.
Yes, yes.
Who else has a question? No, I'm joking. I did not know what direction I was going to go in. I believe that even for a long time, mom and dad, it took me a while to accept I've never been without mom and dad energy. Just because the biological may not be there, I've never been without mama energy around me to guide me, tell me what to do, right? And the same thing with father energy. So I came up by reaching out to one of my moms, Fatima Halim, and we got a chance to talk it through. And she's a storyteller from way back. She's a griot, for real. And she helped me out. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Each of you have an idea for what you want to say tonight. But how did you construct your story? You'd start with the idea, but then where did you go from there?
Great question. Anybody want to tackle that? Who wants to tackle that one? Going once, going, I see your mic raising.
All right.
There we go.
Let's see. So what we teach at South Mountain Community College at their Storytelling Institute is really how to craft, right? Because we all have memories, we all have stories, we all have props to help us do that. So the way I approached it was I had a lot of memories I wanted to share, but I started thinking about 3 to 4 pieces. Introduce you, take you there, and then walk through it together. And so as long as I did that in a circular motion and kind of got going, that's really what I did. And one of the things that we teach and we talk about is what we call the 5 Ps. So Donald Davis, world famous storyteller out in West Virginia, right? North Carolina, there we go. He has a thick accent, so I always think it's there. But he talks about the 5 Ps. So that is the person, the place, the problem, the progress, and then the point. And so as long as you follow that little cadence, that works for me. And so that's how I came to be to my story tonight.
Oh, that's an awesome answer. That's awesome. Betsy, I see you moving.
Well, I thought I would write an outline. I felt I had so much information that I needed to squeeze everything down and try to get the most pregnant thoughts down, and especially what he gave me. And then I realized while I was doing it, I wrote these outlines. I wrote it about 3 times. Then I decided to do it off the cuff.
Nice.
which I really like. In a way, I like doing, because when you do it off the cuff, it's scary, very scary. But sometimes things come out that you don't know will come out, and that's what I do. And
Oh,
when
that's
I wrote
good.
the book about him, I did do an outline. Yeah.
You didn't just look. Okay. Point taken. Please.
So like Kyle mentioned, we study, I study at the Storytelling Institute. I'm also an adjunct there, and we learn about how to craft a story. So I had the idea, I wanted to tell about my dad, and then in the story, as I say, these 3 goals that he had for us, for my sister and myself, it just lent itself to the structure of the story, and then it's kind of like I had that idea of like what those 3 would be, and then creating a full picture around each of them, and then bringing it back and closing it.
Oh, that's good. I forgot we had teachers in the crowd, so hopefully you were taking notes with that. For me personally, I'm not a professional storyteller. This is my 3rd time, my only 2nd time in person doing it from a storytelling standpoint. And thank you. Stop it. But for me, I wanted to think about what as a host, I need to fill in whatever gap that may be left. So what is a message, what is a perspective that may not be shared here to help kind of fill the space out a little bit? So the cultural aspect was important, and having multiple fathers was important to share that culture and to put to bed some of those stereotypes. Yeah, that was important to me. Yeah, thank you. One, we got time for maybe 2. All right, we'll go with 2. Maybe, we'll see. No, I'm joking. And could you say, what was your name, sir? Patrick. We had Patrick. Excuse me, what was your name? Carolee. Carolee, Patrick, and could you please share your name?
Regina, and you're a great MC.
Oh, thank you.
And I got like jealous. I wish I'd had white aunties like you had your uncles.
Yeah. You know, we got to get them on the phone together. Uncle Pat wouldn't mind.
It's never too late, right? You made me jealous, darn it. But to our Danae storyteller, my family's, they were copper miners up in Globe in Miami, and my dad was a veteran. He was in World War II and the Korean War, and we were always reminded, and when he was serious, it would be little girl. If it wasn't for the Navajo and the Navajo code talkers, we'd be speaking Japanese. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Definitely, thank you. And there are worse languages than Japanese out there, let me tell you. I mean, I watch a lot of anime. I'm just saying, it's kind of awesome. Oh, of course. No. You're fine, without a doubt. Sir, could you swing on over here? Get you in the light, brother. Quit hiding in the darkness. Dracula. Maybe this was Dracula. Okay.
Dark is very nice. I agree. Let's go behind this little column here. So my name's Christian, and my question is really what motivates you to keep telling stories? And I want to be very specific that, I think there's an idea that sharing is important, right? Like as a society, but that's very different from a personal value. And you have all taken sharing as almost maybe a lifestyle, something you've developed to kind of its higher form, right? So not just why is it important to share, but why is it important to you to share?
That's a great question. Dinah, Betsy, Kyle.
All right. Because, think of it, the very first stories were told. It's such a natural way to talk about these things, and it's healing.
Yeah.
When you can talk about your deepest fears, your worst miseries, that's when you're healed. And never be afraid to do that. I spent a lot of time in adult children of alcoholics, I spent a lot of time in a lot of therapeutic situations to try to heal myself, and it was talking about it and not feeling the shame that comes with. My father was a judge, and when he tried to kill himself, they sort of glossed over in the newspaper an accidental shooting. Let me tell you, when it's all over the television and everything else, it's extremely painful, especially when you're young. You don't know how to handle it, and people come up to you and they want to be nice, but they want facts. They want to know what you saw, and those are the things that I don't think you ever have to share with anybody unless you want to. It can be really, really bad. But if you're in a safe place with a group, there should be nothing that you should be afraid of talking about, because it's healing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Because it's healing. It's powerful. Please.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to say storytelling is a human experience, right? We're just seeing different perspectives within that. And so what I love about storytelling is connecting with all of you as humans. I just happen to be Diana. And so hopefully through my stories, you learn a little bit more about my culture. You learn a little bit more about how humanistic we are, regardless of what shared stereotypes, assumptions. So I really look at storytelling as advocacy, and I love that. And if I can share the awesome people I've been around, experiences I lived through, even better. That's what keeps me going.
Oh, this is a great question. Y'all getting deep. Please.
What Kyle said. It's very similar to that. When Howard introduced me, he mentioned that I'm first generation American. I come from a country which is known as, it doesn't have the best media reputation here. This is my home now, but I also want to share, like Kyle said, when I share my personal stories, I would like for people to see that it doesn't matter what color I am, what gender I am, where I come from. The experiences are similar. We all have fathers who, or father figures who have taught us something, who have given us something. So we go away with this sense of community. Similar to what Kyle said, I see myself as an ambassador to my birth country, coming to my new country. So I not only tell personal stories, and that's why I tell folk tales and myths and legends as well, because that again brings this sense of community and sameness. It's like, you hear a folk tale like Cinderella, but I'm telling a Cinderella version from Pakistan, and you're like, oh, I've heard that, but this is different, but it's the same. And that's who we are, right?
That's awesome. That is awesome. That is awesome. Please give it up for our storytellers. I really, truly believe that storytelling is addictive. And it's addictive because people need to feel heard. I think that is a need in everyone in some way, shape, form, fashion. So the first time you tell that story and you feel heard, and sometimes it's easier to tell your story in front of strangers than people that you know. So that piece, it can save lives. And some of us, we have a shared experience. My mother died by suicide when I was 2. So we're both survivors.
That's right.
We wouldn't know that if I didn't hear the story, right? So people need to be heard. And right now, it is easy to be ignored. Civility is at an all-time low. So is morale. So is conversations where there are two different opinions. Life is nuanced. It is not that simple. We all represent multiple groups, but we are not just those multiple groups. We are everything, just like you all are. And that is what makes storytelling so special. There is not a culture in the world that was not built on the stories that was told. There is not a form of entertainment that we enjoy today that was not birthed from the original entertainment of storytelling, whether it be your songs, your plays, your movies, even your dance tells a story. I invite you all, in whatever way is your way, never hold your story in your story. Let your story be heard even around those who are not listening. Because I promise, if it ain't that day, it's not a year later, down the line, they're going to flash back about that Diné brother. About when someone says something about Pakistan, you're going to be able to say, hold on. The entire culture? No. There are some male feminists in Pakistan, right? So carry that with you. We're going to be right back here, right? Give it up for ASU Care Cultural Center. Thank you for making this consistent and strong. Thank you. You see, they got to be professional. They got the big name tags. So that means they run the show. We'll be right back here Wednesday, August 28th. And guess what the topic is? This is so funny. Truth or spare? Not dare or spare. Do you know what that is? Do I? I absolutely don't. Let's all figure it out together. When we come back here, ASU, which is spelled KERR.com, for all the upcoming events, the concerts, every great thing that we may have going on here. We appreciate you. We thank you for participating, for listening, and for hearing us. It's nothing like feeling heard. It's a beautiful thing. You all have a great evening. Thank you.